Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and assalamu alaikum. This session is titled Crime Fiction and the Pursuit of Justice. Today, we have Omar Shahid Hamid in conversation with Tooba Masood Khan. I would like to start off the session with an introduction about them. Starting with Omar Shahid. Omar Shahid is a celebrated Pakistani novelist known for his gripping crime thrillers. Currently, his latest novel, The Election, is a satirical take on the political landscapes of the United States and Pakistan. Whereas Tooba Masood Khan is a freelance journalist and communications specialist based in Karachi. She has worked at news media organizations in Pakistan for over 14 years. Respected speakers, we are honored to have you with us today. The stage is yours.
Hi, Omar. How are you?
Hi, Tooba. How are you?
Can everyone hear me? I can also speak really loudly. So I'd really been struggling to introduce you because, as I was telling you earlier, in the newsroom, we were very obsessed with you and your book. So even though we haven't met till before, this is the first time we met, we have been following you and we know a lot of details about you. Also says a lot about me because I am a creep on social media. But yes, you're Omar, you're a counterterrorism professional, you're a police officer, author of 6 books, but in 2014, you were the reason every sub-editor in a newsroom in Karachi was reading the book instead of rushing to finish the day's pages. We were hooked and we wanted to know...
You can't blame me for you guys not working.
I mean, we can. We totally can. We were hooked and we wanted to know who's who in The Prisoner. It brought our work to life because all the characters were so real and we thought we knew them. I spent a lot of time going down rabbit holes instead of doing my job. So let's talk about why we're here. We're here to talk about Omar's new book called The Election. The Election is all about Waj. All he ever wanted from the day he left Pakistan to go to college in Iowa was to live his American dream. A life in the bright lights of celebrity and showbiz in New York City. His world is upended when he crosses paths with Ron Diamond, a retired porn star, real estate mogul, and reality TV guru. On the day that Ron decides to take on the biggest reality show on the planet, an American presidential election. But the book is not just about Waj. It's also about Senator Jessica May, Waj's dad, Shakib, Javed Afridi, and also Shai. It's funny, it's serious, and reminds you of something very similar that happened a couple of years ago. So this leads me to my first question. How did you decide to write about these characters and what was going around them?
It's a funny story. About 5 years ago or so, there was a TV clip that was coming on the news of the former Prime Minister's visit to Washington. And it was, in fact, at that time, Donald Trump's first term. And there's this clip of these two sort of men who had been these iconic figures of the 1980s, playboys, and, a lot of controversy and scandal around them in that time, coming together as world leaders. And I bet you that they weren't really talking about issues of government. What I would have given to have been a fly on the wall in the private conversations between those two. And that just gave me the idea for this book. I wasn't able to start it till much later, but the concept was to kind of take a look at the crazy world of world politics, and do it through a satirical, lens, because it's the world we live in. We've become so polarized across the world, right? We see this again in this last US election. Shukar hai Trump jeet gaya. Meri kitabon ki jo sales hain wo to achhi rahengi. I was perhaps the one person hoping कि नहीं Allah करे हो जाए. So that's great news for me. But because we've become so polarized, because we're kind of it's so difficult for us to accept the other viewpoint. Perhaps the only way to capture the melodrama and the simple fantastical element in politics today is through satire, right? And so that's why I'd never written satire before. As you know, I'm fundamentally a crime fiction writer, but I just wanted to do this because I thought it would be, I'd have a laugh doing it, and I did. I had a great time writing this book.
This leads me really greatly to my next question. What is your writing process like? How do you do your research, and how do you plan out the narrative and the characters?
So the research for this one was interesting. Again, it was a topic that was not something that I had direct experience of. I've always been a great fan of, or rather, I should say, I've always had a great interest in American politics. I am the one who will kind of go back and see what the electoral college count was when Nixon beat Humphrey in '68. And so it was drawing on a lot of that, drawing on a lot of books and stuff on TV and all about various US elections, and obviously also looking at the nature of these figures. So someone like Trump, taking him and reading about him, watching him, seeing what made him tick, what would make a character interesting.
Yeah.
And the same thing, with Pakistani politics is an open book. So all you need to do is watch the news for about 5 minutes to get all the characters you want. I could fill a trilogy with the characters over here.
And you see a lot of them in the election. So how do you pick what you want to write about next? So you've done the police, there's match fixing, there's an election, you've done spies, militants. What grabs your attention?
I've always felt that after a while, if you keep writing the same thing, it gets boring. And also, it doesn't challenge you as a writer. And so that's why, for instance, after I wrote my first 3 books, which were crime thrillers, The Prisoner, The Spinner's Tale, and The Party Worker, I wrote about match fixing in cricket, because this is something that I found interesting, and I decided to do it. Same thing with the election, that I decided to sort of veer off. I think it's whatever strikes me at the moment. So, for instance, the next book that I've started working on.
Already?
Yeah.
Wow.
I wrote the election a while back.
That's book 7.
And I have a lot of free time on my hands, so.
It took me 5 years.
You need to get a job in the government. It's your employment choices that are wrong. So, the concept for the next book came from this case in Lahore, which is a very famous case about Javed Iqbal, who was a serial killer, and actually, if I'm not wrong, has gone down in the Guinness Book of World Records as the most prolific serial killer in history, in terms of the number of kills. And I just thought that, again, to write a serial killer thriller in a Pakistani context would be fascinating. So, it's a very random process. Perhaps the next one should be about the happenings within a newsroom and how everyone doesn't really work there.
Yes. I mean, there's a lot that happens in a newsroom. You get really mysterious phone calls. Out of all the 6 books that you've written so far, which one is your favorite and why?
I don't think I can pick one, and the reason for that I keep saying is, books are kind of like your children, so you don't really pick which one is the best, even though everyone has a favorite.
Of course, The Prisoner.
But also it's about, for me, it's about different times in your life. So at a certain point in my life, I was very fascinated about writing about a certain topic, right? And as you evolve, both as a writer and as a person, your interests change, your sort of scope widens or narrows, however you go about it. So it keeps changing. I don't have a definitive answer to that. But yeah, at different points in time, each one of those books has been my favorite.
Also, I've always been really curious about this. Who is your first reader? Like, once you finish writing something, is it someone in your family? Is it your friend? Is it your agent? Like, who does the first read and gives you feedback on that?
My first reader actually is always myself, in the sense that before I even start writing a book, the sense check that I do is when I'm kind of, putting together, okay, what it should be and what I should, what the book should represent, is it something that I would like to read? Because I read a lot, and I read a fairly diverse amount of stuff. And for me, if it passes that test, that, okay, if I were to go into a bookstore and I saw this book, would it be something that I'd pull off the shelf? And so that's my first test.
Okay.
And then, of course, it goes to my biggest critic, which is my wife, who kind of, rolls me over the coals about it. But I have always been a better writer because she does that.
Interesting. Also, how
She says it keeps me humble. I'm not sure, but maybe, perhaps.
Is it difficult to write fiction? Your characters are obviously inspired by real life people and events. Do you draw a line on how much you're taking from real life?
That's an interesting question. It's not just about, I guess, drawing a line. It's also about, we had this session yesterday where someone asked this question about whether it was fair to kind of expropriate characters really without their consent. And I guess my answer to that yesterday was yes, because it's about stories, right? So I might have a friend in the audience whose some facet of their life may be very fascinating, and they may never tell that story. But I feel that as a storyteller, if I get an opportunity to do so, I would love to tell that story. Now, that may kind of not be, at times they'll think it's gratifying, and other times they may feel that, no, it was kind of something that was ours. But I always feel that it's something that's out there. If it wasn't me, it would be someone else. And if it's a great story, I think it deserves to be told, right?
Okay. My next question is a little similar to the earlier one. When you're writing crime fiction, do you sometimes hold back yourself from what you've learned and seen on the job to what you're going to write on paper?
Yes, in a sense, because I think you have to simplify and make what you're giving to the reader digestible. The details of, let's say, a murder investigation can be quite nuanced and complex or whatever, but when you're going to write about it in a fictional format, you have to obviously understand that 99% of the readers are not going to be professional investigators, and you have to make it palatable to them. And also not just palatable, I mean, there may be parts of that investigation or that inquiry which are boring, which are not great reading. So at the same time, as the writer side of me has to find a way to keep the reader turning to the next page, right? So in many ways, you have to kind of compress, simplify, focus on certain elements and not focus on others. Because I think, it's not, and this is, I think, where sometimes we get a bit fuzzy about these things. It's not a non-fiction history book, right? Like, even if we take the election, it is a parody, it is a satire, and no matter how much the characters may seem very familiar because of their, being based on people in real life, at the end of the day, it's a fun book, it's a novel. And you've got to keep that in mind. You can't, I think, go too deep and make it about, I have to sort of make it as historically accurate as possible.
Have you thought about writing a nonfiction?
So it's interesting. When the first time I ever thought about it, I thought I would never be able to write nonfiction because it's just too. I know the process that you and Sabah went through when you wrote Society Girl, and before that, when you did the podcast for it. It's too grueling. It's too tough a process. And as a writer, I like to have the freedom to play around with the facts, so to speak. However, having said that, the first time that I actually listened to your podcast about this case, and for those of you who are not aware, Tooba and her colleague Sabah have written this non-fiction true crime book called Society Girl, which is about a murder in 1970 of a famous poet, and it's quite scandalous with all sorts of.
A lot of scandals, really.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
Thank you.
It was the first time that I felt that perhaps something like this is doable, because yes, it takes a lot of research, it takes a lot of dedication. I mean, you yourself have said that it took you guys 5 years to write it, but perhaps there are certain events in our history that we've not really covered. And we kind of have sort of, and it's very easy as time advances to move past these events, right? And for those events to be quickly forgotten. We talk about Karachi in the 90s and early 2000s, and the violence and the whole phenomenon of the MQM and things like that. And actually now it's been about 30 years since all of that. And I was having this chat with a friend of mine who's thinking of doing a documentary on this. And his point was that in a few more years, the people who were part of that are going to be dead. And so that part of our history, which in one way or another affected all of us to a greater or lesser extent, will vanish. And perhaps writing about it, or as my friend is doing, making a documentary about it, to preserve those facts is very important.
I mean, just to add to that, reinvestigating a murder investigation from 50 years ago was quite hard, because a lot of these people were dead, and a lot of them died while we were doing the research.
Yeah.
So it was very difficult to actually do that. Okay,
and for most of us, we had never heard of, most people of my generation and younger, they'd never heard of Mustafa Zaidi, right? So it came as news to us, and I remember talking about this with my mother, and she said, it was, it was the scandal at the time. So it's easy for history to get sort of wiped out as time goes along.
Truly. I'm going to stop talking about after this and let you guys ask questions, but how different is fighting crime and writing about crime?
How different is it? The writing bit is significantly easier, let's put it that way. People till now don't try and blow up your offices. However, that may change after the election, so perhaps.
I mean, there was once a grenade thrown at my office, so that was quite exciting, and we just ran up to see what happened and see if you could find the grenade. So yes, over to you guys.
It was probably thrown by a member of the newsroom who wanted an early break.
I mean, yes, it could have been. उस दिन pages करने का किसी का भी mood नहीं था. But yes, is there a mic? Can we open the floor to discussion? I see there's a hand up already. 2 hands, wow, 3. You're quite popular, Omar. Crowds को कैसे रोकेंगे?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, please raise your hand and the mic will be brought to you.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Aqib.
Your mic isn't on.
Hello. You can hear me? So this is Aqib. मेरा क्वेश्चन उमर से ये है कि ये अपनी नेक्स्ट बुक जो है पाकिस्तानी इलेक्शंस के ऊपर कब लिख रहे हैं, और क्या इनको डर है कि वो बुक लिखने के बाद डाला तो नहीं आ जाएगा पीछे, और उस बुक का नाम होना चाहिए द सिलेक्शन.
It's writing itself.
Don't really need to do anything.
It's actually a very interesting point of view, because when I wrote the election, it was more about kind of the time when these sorts of populist leaders rose, right? So their rise, perhaps the time period circa 2016, 17, 18, like that. And obviously a lot has changed, and in both, right? In terms of the Pakistani context and in terms of the American context, because the book is based in those two places, a lot has changed. In fact, it's a very kind of viable option to come up and use the same characters for a kind of sequel. And see, how things have progressed a few years down the line. So yeah, perhaps after the serial killer book. Absolutely.
That would be actually quite exciting. I'd like to read a sequel to that.
Title तो आ गया है.
हाँ, title तो आ गया है, बिल्कुल.
What inspired you to start
Mohsin Hamid, but I won't tell you why. It's not because, it's... no, I was reading something and I had never been a writer or anything like that before. And I just thought that it was something cathartic, and so I stumbled onto it. So, yeah.
Which were your favorite crime books that inspired you to become a crime writer?
Favorite crime books? I think really the best crime book of all time, perhaps, is The Godfather. If you want to read a true crime novel, I don't think you can sort of do better than The Godfather.
What about people like James Hadley Chase or Peter James, things like that?
James Hadley Chase was the one with all the dirty bits in the books, right? मुझे कुछ याद आता है मुझे. कुछ याद आता है मुझे. Perhaps.
I just want, newsroom drama is not something new, although it's not been written about in Pakistan. But is the excitement because of what is now peddled as news, or what has historically been a newsroom excitement that goes behind whatever happens on the screen?
I don't know. I mean, you're more qualified.
I mean, there's a lot that goes on in a newsroom. There's so much internal politics that's happening, and I've worked into, well, 3 very, very different newsrooms. I've worked in legacy media, I worked in new media, and I worked in digital media. So हर उसके अंदर एक अलग चीज़ चल रही होती है. जो crime beat होती है वो कोई और cover कर रहा होता है, उसके अपने मसले होते हैं. जो health कर रहा होता है उसके अपने होते हैं. Pages बनाना. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on. I think it would definitely be a good book or a TV show.
Mr. Umar, my name is Jamil. You are a police officer yourself. Please tell us something good about our police officers who do the crime investigation in our country.
Sorry sir, can you repeat that? थोड़ा
आपके अपने तजुर्बे में जो चीज़ आई है पुलिस ऑफिसर में के क्राइम इन्वेस्टिगेशन में
जी
तो उसके बारे में हमें कुछ एजुकेट करें कि कोई उनके हाई पॉइंट्स क्या हैं, क्योंकि you have yourself been affected, your father was murdered here, so in that light you have gone through the experience yourself also, so can you please?
So आप कह रहे हैं positive this thing.
Because when we start reading police, POLIC, each of the letter has a significance which is vastly different to our naked eyes.
सही आपने बड़ा अच्छा सवाल किया. It's a very good question, और ख़ास तौर पर because understandably so, unfortunately our perception of the police in this city, perhaps in this country, is generally speaking not a positive one. Yesterday the delegates of the KLF were at a dinner that was hosted by the IG Sindh at the Sindh Police Museum, and in that dinner the IG had a very pertinent point. He said, absolutely, take us to task for our deficiencies, but at the same time, and this is honestly the one thing that I've learned over a now 24-year career, there is heroism every day, and that heroism comes from the most ordinary of people. Your most ordinary traffic constables, your most ordinary SHOs. The fact that despite the overwhelmingly negative circumstances in which they have to function, despite a tremendously difficult operating environment, these people show up to work again and again and again. Again, we can certainly, argue about the quality of their service, but the fact that they do that, the fact that, every morning there have been days in this city when the city has burned, and the next morning at a police station or at a traffic chowki, those people were back on duty, sorting things out when the rest of the city was shut. I think that's true heroism. And I think, when we talk about positivity, and again, मैं बार-बार यही कहूँगा, that doesn't mean that we rest on our laurels. Of course, we have to do better. But we also have to appreciate that side of it.
Omar, if you don't mind, there's a gentleman in a yellow shirt who's been raising his hand for quite a while. Could someone give the mic to the gentleman in the yellow shirt in the back, please?
In the meantime, may I ask? This was regarding when you were talking about creating a character in the novel.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No,
Yes.
not at all. You were talking about creating a character in the novel, fictional character about the real person you experienced in your real life. So I thought about a writer who said to have friends, "Don't mess with me, or you'll end up in my novel."
I tell that to my friends every day.
Yeah, you will end up in my
So
novel.
they should all watch out.
Yeah, coming to the question now, the title of the session is Writing Crime Fiction and in Pursuit of Justice. How do you relate the pursuit of justice by writing the crime fiction? This is my question to both the host and yourself.
How do you relate the pursuit of justice to writing crime fiction? Yeah, I found, again, this is my experience, that writing crime fiction has been, and of course for me personally, but I think also for a lot of people who have read my books, writing crime fiction has been an extremely cathartic process. I mean, Tooba mentioned that when my first book came out, they would have these debates in the newsroom about which
Lengthy
character.
debates, guys, which is why you were at work till 3 in the morning.
And I think it was because at that time, when that book came out, it was a time when, we as Karachiites were just coming out of this very long period, a period of something like 30 odd years of domination by one political party, by one sort of ideology, so to speak. And the things that were written about in the book were things that people only spoke of in whispers, and no one really only very, very brave journalists wrote about them, and many of those brave journalists were subsequently targeted for writing about them. And so it was, but everyone knew what was going on, right? So everyone in the city knew exactly what was going on, and what a sector office was, and
What a unit in charge was.
what a unit in charge was, and all those things. And so I think, the feedback I got, now, The Prisoner was written about 12 years ago, so over the period of longer than a decade, as Karachiites, reading things like that is a cathartic process. Because I think, we haven't really been able to process the trauma, if you look at it in those terms, that we've been through collectively. And so I guess reading things like this, and I'm not saying, there are many books that are much better than mine that would probably deal with these topics, but I think when you sort of look at this sort of stuff, it's cathartic because it kind of enables you, without coming too close to get burnt by the real facts, to sort of look at what happened and to try and process what happened. Ooh, the
yellow
person in the
shirt
yellow,
here.
right? The gentleman in the yellow.
Assalamu alaikum.
Islam.
This is a what if. It's 1970, and you are the investigating officer of the Mustafa Zaidi case. What would you have done differently?
Good question.
I really want to know what you would have done differently, Omar.
The problem is that I heard the podcast, I bought the book, and then my mother stole the book. So I haven't read it till the end. I think it depends on what sort of mentality that you would take back. So I think, and again, this is my sort of rough view as a police officer, a lot of the things that were connected to the Mustafa Zaidi case, right? whatever the various goings on, and was perhaps far beyond the understanding and imagination of the average investigating officer at that time. So if, perhaps if you had a time machine and you could transport an investigating officer from our times back then, he or she might actually come to very different conclusions. But I think for that time, for those people who were in the police at that time to be investigating it, it just blew their mind. And I think there was just a lack of knowledge as to, what this was and kind of what were the implications of it.
I mean, the only thing I wish, if you were the investigating officer, would have happened is someone would have saved some archives for us to find it 50 years later.
Yeah, because I would have written a novel about it.
I mean, that would have really helped.
तुम्हारी किताब का मैं पता काट देता.
Sadly, I just read the book Society Girl and I came to know that she was the tenant of our very good family friends and our old neighbor also in Bangalore town. And they were living in Dhaka at that time.
Okay.
As soon as the board of Dhaka took place, they came back here as well. So I found it very, very interesting.
Where's the next question? कहाँ?
There's this lady, there's a gentleman in the back.
There's a lady over there in the corner. यार उस
and
तरफ
a
आपके
gentleman
पीछे.
there. ये सामने.
आपके पीछे वो.
वो
भी
वहाँ
है.
पे पीछे भी एक पीछे.
Thank you very much, Omar. I'm one of your biggest foreign fans, I think. I read all your books. I'm looking forward to the election. You just talked now about the cathartism for, Karachiites reading the books. The Spinner's Tale, for me, was actually very illuminative, I think, even for people living in Britain. So, I wasn't too happy with the ending. Would you think of having a sequel?
That was a very difficult book to write, Victoria. It was a very dark book. Yes, I mean, that's another great idea. I mean, I've got sort of my next 3 book ideas lined up. I'm worried that I have to share royalties with these guys. There's a serial killer guy, then there's the Form 47 guy, then there's Victoria. So 3 किताबें तो
आप break नहीं ले रहे क्या?
So I mean, it's certainly something that I think it will be very difficult revisiting that, but yeah, perhaps, why not?
Okay.
This gentleman at the back.
Do you want to get the lady in the back first?
Yeah, we'll get the lady at the back.
Are there any more questions, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. Please pass on the mic to him. Volunteers.
उनको दे दें, उन्होंने धरना दे देना है. उनका सवाल ज़रूर है.
May I, because
We have some fans.
Umar, you were part of the investigation team of Arshad Sharif's murder. So I've got a couple of questions regarding that. One is, do you think there's a story in there? And secondly, why were you included? Were you included to give the team some sort of a legitimacy, knowing your background? And what were the restrictions that you had in the investigations? How far could you go on to really find out what actually happened?
That's another book idea.
Yes,
right there.
I see you now have 4.
This is like less a session at KLF, more like a personal brainstorming session. Definitely, perhaps a book there sometime in the future.
Maybe I'll beat you to it.
Maybe. As far as your question about, obviously I have no this thing as to, the government chooses who is a member of the investigating or inquiry team and who isn't. And as far as I was concerned, there were no restrictions. And the report was submitted in the Supreme Court. It's over there, so you'll have to ask them.
Can we please get that lady? She's been waiting for quite a while.
Okay, so let me just ask the question. Omar, do you have ever any contradiction between your professionalism and your fiction writing? And do you have any discomfort
reality? Thank you.
So your question is about discomfort amongst my colleagues in the police force about the fiction that I write. No, I haven't. I have discomfort from other writers about juggling my two hats because I remember once Muhammad Hanif famously told me that there should be restrictions on you because you go and you get these stories from the police and then you write books. So it's an unfair advantage that you have. So yes,
He's
definitely.
not wrong.
So
Not wrong.
writers definitely have a problem with that. Police officers less so. Unko up till now, none of my colleagues have ever expressed anything other than admiration and support.
May I?
Yes.
Omar,
It's a good segue to a colleague.
well, natural connection, that question now. Just finished saying that a lot of your colleagues have a lot of admiration for you, and I'm no
Sir,
different.
are you going to tell me that they don't?
No, they do.
Please do tell us.
I'm no different. So I really admire your writing, and of course, working alongside you over the last quarter of a century, I also admire your professionalism. So this question does not naturally pertain to your professionalism, it's about your writing style. Now, to me, and I've mentioned it in a bilateral conversation with you also, that your writing style is quite bold in so many ways. And I think it's quite natural for a writer of your stature to do that. But because of that writing style, and as a serving police officer, have you come under any sort of challenging situation from any of the authorities around as to the kind of works that you produce are in direct contradiction or conflicting your professional requirements, so to say? Thank you.
Again, at the end of the day, it's fiction. And I think people recognize that it's fiction. Perhaps if I was someone who wrote non-fiction books or true crime books, there may have been more of an issue. But I think at the end of the day, people do recognize that it's fiction. And, they're okay with it.
Wow, I see someone very eagerly raising their hands. Three more questions. Do we have time?
Three more questions.
एक ये है काले मास्क वाली और एक वहाँ पे भी है.
I must say that your father was a real hero. He came here in the time, very difficult time, and he really wanted to improve the electricity system of Karachi. Unfortunately, he was murdered. As a son, I know your mother also put a very great effort to, to contest that situation which was developing around. Are you satisfied how the way the investigation of the murder of your father was done? Because he was a hero of Karachi. In real life, not in fiction.
Yes, I believe, obviously, not only as a complainant, but subsequently as a police officer. It's a case that I have looked at from both facets. I continue to look at it. In fact, it is still, as far as one of the accused is concerned, it's still under trial. And I continue to look at it. In fact, the other day, I was reviewing some statements made in court. And I think that absolutely, I am satisfied with that investigation. And also, to be very honest with you, satisfied in terms of what, in a wider context, happened subsequently, in the sense that there was this political mafia that at one point in time, and for a very, very long time, it seemed as if they would never kind of, be removed from their position of power, and not just me or my family as sort of individuals, but there was a whole host of Karachiites from all walks of life who kind of suffered as a result. And so to sort of see, to have been able to see the collapse of that mafia-like system is extremely gratifying. And I think it certainly kind of makes me believe that there is a higher power out there that what's the famous line that is it from Dr. Martin Luther King, that the arc of history is long but ultimately bends towards justice. So I think it's one of those things. Yeah.
I think it's my turn now. My
Yes.
question is for Tooba, actually. Omar, we know you have a lot of book ideas in progress. That's great. You also got some ideas here. Tooba, I really want to know what your next book project would be, because you came out with the first true crime podcast, I think, in Pakistan. You wrote Society Girl with Saba. What's next up for you? Is it going to be fiction, non-fiction, a memoir?
I mean, maybe do my day job first. But no, I am working on a couple of podcast ideas, and I'm actually working on one with my husband. We are true crime buffs and really obsessed with crime. So yes, there's going to be more podcasts, and maybe in the next, hopefully before 5 years, there should be another book.
So did your work give you time off to?
No, no. So when you're in the newsroom, you do a lot of fixing freelance work on the side. So I would do my day job, then other work, and then other work.
Fantastic.
So yeah. Yes, gentleman in the pink shirt.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सर। मेरा नाम फ़ारूक आज़म है और काफ़ी सालों से मैं आपकी बुक्स पढ़ता आ रहा हूँ। प्रिजनर वन ऑफ माय बेस्ट, और ये भी मैंने काफ़ी दिन से बुक फेयर से लिए, तो इसकी रीडिंग कंटिन्यू है। मेरा आपसे एक जनरल क्वेश्चन है कि एज ए यंगस्टर आप हमें क्या सजेस्ट करेंगे कि हमें आपकी बुक्स के अलावा कौन सी ऐसी बुक्स हैं जो पढ़नी चाहिए, ख़ास तौर पे सेल्फ डेवलपमेंट और ऐसे पॉलिटिकल और सोशल प्रेशर्स को ओवरकम करने के लिए?
सर, सबसे पहले तो मैं आपका शुक्रगुजार हूँ कि आपने मुझे यंगस्टर बोला। मतलब आज के बाद आप मेरे हीरो हैं।
मैंने लास्ट टाइम आपको सुपरस्टार कहा था।
नहीं, वो इतना इम्पोर्टेंट नहीं है। यंगस्टर बोलना इस वक्त जो है ना ज़्यादा अहमियत रखता है। देखिए सर, मैं हमेशा एक चीज़ कहता हूँ सारे लोगों के, जिस दुनिया में हम रह रहे हैं ना, ख़ास तौर पर जो सोशल मीडिया और टेक्नोलॉजिकल डेवलपमेंट्स हो रही हैं, ये मैटर नहीं करता कि आप क्या पढ़ें, ये मैटर करता कि आप पढ़ें। बिकॉज़ ऑलरेडी हमारे बच्चों की जनरेशन में एक बड़ी सीरियस इशू है कि लोगों के पढ़ने की ना, टू गेट चिल्ड्रन टू रीड। तो मैं समझता हूँ कि आप कुछ भी पढ़ें तो आपकी दुनिया खुलती है, आपका दिमाग खुलता है एज एन इंडिविजुअल। मेरा ज़ाती ज़िंदगी का तजर्बा यही रहा है। तो मैं आपको यही कहूँगा कि जो पढ़ें, हाँ मुझे ज़रूर पढ़िएगा, मेरी बिक्री होती है, लेकिन मेरे अलावा भी जो आपको जी में आए पढ़ें।
अभी 3 और किताबें आने वाली हैं, तो बस तैयार हो जाएं।
Yeah, hello Omar. Yeah, I had the same question actually.
We are in, to answer the lady's question about Netflix, we're in, rather I should say, the producers who bought the options for The Prisoner are in negotiations. I believe that they've tied up with a very famous producer who has had a number of hits on Netflix. And they are supposed to go into pre-production as in now, but good, I'll check up with them. So I don't know exactly when it'll air, but I would venture it would still take probably another 18 months or so, 18 to 24 months. But the good thing is that the likelihood of it getting picked up by a streaming service like Netflix or Amazon Prime has increased very significantly. Are you done?
I mean, I'm sure we can let people ask more questions if you want.
Well, sure, if we have time.
So I have a question to ask you.
Absolutely.
So a lot of people over here asked about your dad. How do you respond to that? So like even with when you're doing Society Girl things, and like obviously a big part of the book for me was my dad, because the reason I actually got interested in the case is because a friend of his told me to look into it because there were a lot of similarities with the case. Obviously, like a journalist, I got into it and I was so obsessed with it. But later, like I think a couple of years into it, I didn't see any similarities. They were very similar and everything, but wo nahi tha. And then I got my dad's case file, and like, you know, I would obsess over it. So what I'm trying to ask you, I guess, is how do you put yourself out of that when you're writing or when you're doing anything else? And do you ever think you'd want to write about your dad's case?
I think this is where being a fiction writer is an advantage, in the sense that it gives you that level of detachment. You know, if I had to write, I think the most difficult thing in the world for me would be to write a non-fiction book on my father's case, right? I recently wrote a little article that was included as an anthology. We had to talk about it yesterday. And it was the first time I was when I was on stage, I was telling the audience that it was a very difficult piece for me to write, even though it was like 2,500 words, you know, and I've written 6 books which are all 100,000 words. You know? But it was difficult because it was personal. And as a fiction writer, it's easy and necessary to detach yourself and to kind of, you know, create a world, create these characters that may have similarities to real life but aren't real life. So I think, yeah, it would be very, very difficult.
Anyone want to ask anything before we wrap up?
Yes, ma'am.
That's a tough one.
Which book inspired me? There is actually an answer to that, but you know, it's not very. What's the word? It's not very. Yeah, it's not very politically correct for me to say that. So I'm happy to have a private conversation with the young man and give him that politically incorrect answer. Yes, let's get that gentleman and then we
The
can
gentleman in the back, yes, you.
Sir, aapka.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sir, you had been very close to police officer like Chaudhry Aslam. Why don't you write a book depicting these sacrifices rendered by these police officers since 1985, when this city was engulfed by this menace of terrorism and militancy?
I think I have written that book. It was the first book I wrote. And as I said to the earlier point, that it is easier to write about these things which are very painful in fiction. But I don't know if you read my first book or not, but essentially it is exactly about, The Prisoner is about the police and what they had to go through in the 80s and 90s and all of that. It's exactly about that. You should get a copy. There's a woman right at the back. Wow.
Yes, we're all very big fans of your books. But to get a bigger audience, are you having all your books translated? Because majority don't read English in Pakistan, you know that. So the stories are so good, it should reach the masses.
Ma'am, could you hold the mic closer?
If you get your books translated, the masses can appreciate it much more because the stories are super. And otherwise, just a handful are enjoying, the rest are not, being deprived of such good stories. Pakistani writers, which are so rare. So please consider translating all your books.
No, absolutely. In fact, you may or may not know that The Prisoner has already been translated into Urdu. It's called Kaidi. And my third book, The Party Worker, is also in the process of being translated. So I absolutely agree with your point that translating these books into Urdu introduces them to a much wider and much more diverse audience. Absolutely, bilkul. It's on the agenda. Ji, ma'am. Which school or college? Why is that important? Ji, bilkul. Okay. But do you think that schools or colleges have an impact? Or do you think it's individuals? अच्छा, मेरे तो सारे लैंग्वेज टीचर निकम्मे थे, लेकिन मैंने 6 किताबें लिख डाली. Perhaps. कोई मेरे लैंग्वेज टीचर है तो नहीं? नहीं. ये तो आप आज कह रही हैं ना.
I think we can. Oh,
yeah, I think we
there's
can.
more question.
Sure. There's one more there.
जस्ट अ शॉर्ट वन. आपने भी जिक्र किया कि कैदी ट्रांसलेट हुई है और पार्टी वर्कर को आप कर रहे हैं. सो आई होप देयर इज़ नो गेटिंग लॉस्ट इन ट्रांसलेशन. उनका एसेंस किताबों का जो आपने इंग्लिश में लिखा है उर्दू में भी बिल्कुल वैसे आ रहा है, बिकॉज मेरा भी इत्तेफाक नहीं हुआ कैदी पढ़ने का, ऑल्दो आई एम अ बिग फैन ऑफ प्रिजनर, बट स्टिल.
बिल्कुल, ये बड़ा अच्छा सवाल आपने किया. इट्स वेरी गुड क्वेश्चन. One of the issues obviously always in translating is the fact that the essence gets lost in translation. और हमारे यहाँ उर्दू, when we talk about books coming to Urdu, there's a slight issue that largely what you've had up till now is literary Urdu, right? So it's, whereas if you look at my books, they're more very commercial, very sort of grassroots in many ways. And when we started the translation of The Prisoner, one of the discussions I had with the translator Inam Nadeem Saab was this. I said, Inam Saab, dekhein, I know your background is very literary, but this is not a literary book. This is a book about the streets of Karachi. And agar us kitab mein maa behan ki gaaliyan hain, to you can't excise them out. You have to include it, because that's what is bringing those characters to life. And to his credit, he's done that. And he says that it was very difficult for him to do. He had to kind of really take a big gulp and say कि यार ये किस किस्म की चीज़ है कि हर दूसरी लाइन पर जो है कोई माँ बहन की गाली है या इस तरह की कोई ना तहजीब याफ्ता बात है. But वही वाली बात है कि I think only if it comes out in that version do you have a chance to connect with as the lady at the back says, with a much wider audience, who is interested or wanting to read these sorts of things. You should think of translation as well.
We are thinking about it. Let's see what happens because it's more difficult. Like, your books are so easy to read, so I'm assuming the translation would have, well, doesn't sound like it was
Inam
easy.
साहब से पूछो ना कि ऊपर क्या गुजरी.
तो देखें क्या होता है.
Fantastic.
And with that, we say thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Respected speakers, thank you for such a wonderful session. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Next up, we have a book launch for Soliloquies Existing on Earth. The session begins at 1:30. Thank you.
Din